Okay, alright. Amasa, Ramon Wai in Death Will Win, or 안녕하세요, 제 이름은 라몬입니다. 잘 지냈어요? I did that to flex. No, I'm just kidding. But that was basically the cultural blast I experienced there at Kisviox, and I just wanted to break the ice a bit. So again, my name is Ramon, and I'm here from Kisviox, and I want to be transparent today. I never thought I would ever do a mission trip because I didn't think sharing my faith with others was that important. Before going to Kisviox, I convinced myself that reading the Bible and praying regularly was enough to sustain my spiritual life. I didn't think I needed to be vulnerable and have fellowship. I didn't think I needed to share my faith because I thought I could do everything by myself without others. But at the beginning of this year, my spiritual life began to plateau, and I was frustrated that I couldn't hear God. It was around April when the First Nations mission was announced that hints began to creep into my mind that maybe I do need others. Nevertheless, I still hesitated, telling myself it wasn't for me, to the point that I missed the deadline to sign up. Later that week though, Carl and I were sitting in my car, parked in his driveway. The deadline was like 4 days ago, and we were having a conversation at 12 a.m. Hey, what if we did go on the First Nations mission trip? And it started off as us messing around, saying things like, oh, it's too late though, or what if we became missionaries? But, we just couldn't let it go, and we kept talking about it. And then the idea started settling into our minds, and I said, okay, I'll email Pastor Phil tomorrow. If he lets us join, then we can take that as a sign that we have to double down and commit to this. And so the next morning, I sent the email out, and the day after that, Pastor Phil responded with, yes, please sign up before Sunday, please. And so we did. And at the time, it felt like a spur-of-the-moment decision. I thought nothing of it, but looking back at it now, I realized that for some reason, I was bold in my faith again. You'd think that, everything at that point was starting to get better, but even though I started attending training sessions, my attendance was still sporadic because my mind still continued to hesitate. You guys can probably tell that one of the things I'm really good at is hesitating. So, in one of the training sessions, Haley brought our group, which finally got to meet for the first time about 2 weeks before missions, into the newcomers room and asked us, why did we choose to do missions? And when everyone spoke, everyone had such selfish reasons where they cared about purpose and the people there. Yet, I felt like my reasons were selfish. To summarize, I basically said, this looks like a way for me to fix myself. I just want to learn how to work in a team and learn how to care a little bit about others. But seeing the attitude of my group and how seriously they took this, I didn't want to let them down. So in the little time I had left, I tried to hone in so I wouldn't be the one holding them back. I made a lot of my own effort to meditate and set time aside for God, but because I was forcing it, it felt like a pseudo-faith, and I just made it to get by. It wasn't a relationship with God. It was a desperate attempt for me to reach God out of my own efforts. Well, the day of the trip finally came, and let me tell you, that first full day was rough. I found out I had to do door-to-door, and I'm actually insanely shy. So every time I knocked, I stuttered to say hi. I don't even remember what I said, so I'm pretty sure it's all suppressed now. But it was embarrassing how many L's I took. It was like basically, hi. You like Jesus? But, while we were walking home, I'm feeling defeated. I'm comparing myself to my group, and everyone I think did way better than I did. There was a group of people hanging out near a gas station, and we tried to connect them. Except this time, I wasn't as afraid. That same boldness that made me go to missions overcame me, and I approached these two people in the truck, mingled a little bit, and it felt like a natural conversation where I wasn't overthinking it anymore. Then the person I was talking to said, I really like what you guys are doing. You guys should contact Jessica. She's the one who runs the Brighter Futures program here, and honestly, it just feels so good that I didn't mess up another interaction. Little did I know though that, even though we never met Jessica, when we did go to the Kisviox Family and Health Center, the day before we were about to leave, we got into contact with Nicole, who was the boss of Jessica's boss. And she said, feel free to contact her for next year. So it took 6 days for that small interaction to unfold, and it was pretty crazy how God worked in that way. I was striking out, but just had one good connection, leading to our contact for next year. And keep in mind, apparently we came in during a rough week because there was a cultural camp going on, so the youth were there, and there were a few other events else happening, so attendance is kind of rough, but still, Nicole said that for next year they'll help us get the word out, so she'd help us market what we're doing and integrate us into their programs. And this is one of those instances where God gave our team a step in the right direction that none of us saw coming. And we didn't have any control over that. It was a situation where we just had to be willing and let God move. And so, as the week progressed, it was a cycle of wake up, devotional, prepare for VBS and other stuff, do the VBS and other stuff, prepare for the afternoon event, do the afternoon event, and then some extra stuff, which led to us debriefing at the end of the day. And throughout those days, I regained a habit of journaling my thoughts again. I started enjoying devotionals and praying to God in every unsure situation. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that the amount of time we spent praying was like 30% of the time. Okay, I am exaggerating a little bit. 30% was like sleeping, praying, and eating. But you get the point. There was a lot of praying. Oh, wait, hold on. Okay, but what we realized was the more we immersed ourselves in God's presence, the more God revealed to us how much He was needed there, and this made us immerse ourselves in Him even more. Some of the things we heard and saw were so heartbreaking, like how some of the kids that we taught in VBS had broken families and were taken away, or had PTSD to the point that they developed a toxic sense of perfectionism, so they could never make a mistake. And even in attending one of their services, we found out there were brothers bitter against each other who didn't want to let go of their pride and heal their families. Or a grown daughter who runs away at the thought of reconciliation with her father because he wasn't the one who raised her. And God knows that one of my strongest values is family. I keep a tight knit with my parents and siblings to the point that even though my brother and I come from another church and he's like married, he's right there supporting me as I give my first mission trip testimony. So that's where God hit me on my weakest spot. I can't bear to see broken families that hate each other, or kids who lose their self-worth because their parents don't want them. My mind changed from saying I need others to benefit myself to saying, God, please use me as a vessel to share joy to these broken people. I wanted to give all I could to these people in our ministry. I want to give the kids as much joy as I could offer. I didn't want tiredness to be my limiting factor, and you could ask anyone in our team. It was like the Holy Spirit renewed everyone with this unending energy. We could have had 4 hours of sleep the night before because there was so much to debrief, but we never complained. And we never said, I'm tired. It's like we tapped into a strength that didn't just allow us to operate, but to give us a joy to do our tasks well. And while I did find some joy in our VBS and outreach events, the in-betweens were a bit hard on me because I never told the group I struggled to find this joy by myself. I only found it serving others throughout the week. That's where God showed me again how much He knows me, how much I need to stop trying to carry my burdens alone, and how I need to stop relying on myself or my own efforts. None of you know this, which is fine, but I was a break dancer in high school, and I also took drum lessons when I was 10. I love beats and expressing myself through movement, but I try not to show that to others. In an odd sequence of events, John, Emily, and Shay were supposed to do music for our noodle night, but Shay wasn't feeling well, and John asked me if I could play the cajon. And keep in mind that while we were unloading the bus on the first day, I saw the cajon, and I said, yo, is that a cajon? And John said, yeah, do you play? And I said, well, only a little bit. And then John asked me, like, oh, that's great, we might need you. And in my head, I'm thinking, wait, I don't play the cajon, like, actually, I just like the beats. You got like the wrong dude. And I really hoped he wasn't gonna need me, but turns out he needs me. Well, now, usually I'm also a background guy. I like to do tech, I like to do slides. And I like being unseen. And I kind of started to get anxious about being placed up front when I've never had experience. And that's when that same mentality crept up again about me relying on my own work so I didn't fail my team. And I didn't want to make Shay also overexert herself. I spent a few hours listening to the songs we were playing, going in the corner trying to find what beat goes best with the song, and beating myself up whenever it went off time. And what I looked like was basically me sitting in the corner, hugging the cajon, left hand with like the phone, trying to listen to music in my right hand, just trying to find it. And I don't know, it was the craziest thing I ever did, but I was kidding. Yeah, but I just got so absorbed in my own performance, worrying about like 4/4 time or 6/8 time, that it caused me to stumble even more. And eventually, we did make it through the noodle night, but I was tasked with performing 6 songs for our worship and prayer night. And that's when my mentality doubled down even more. I struggled to do 1, and you're asking me to do 6? Like, are you sure about that? But that was just me overthinking and going to a spiral again. What was weird though was, as I walked through the church setting up, trying to think of like the songs to do, and how I could prepare for 6 songs in like 2 hours, Alex came by and said, "Are you finding joy?" And I'm just thinking, finding joy? What does he mean by that? And I just wanted, yeah man, it's alright. And so, practice began, but Emily had to help prepare food, so it ended up just being John and I preparing. And I forgot how we ended up outside, but John pulled me out since I think he saw that I was struggling and overthinking playing the cajon. And we had a little bit of a heart-to-heart. And this boldness in me came back again. And it was really unexpected because it allowed me to be vulnerable to him. I told him I was struggling, and I had this pressure to perform well, or else I might let the team down or limit what God could do. I told him that I usually like things precise and well-rehearsed, leaving no room for error. And then John asked me, "How's that going for you?" I was like, "Not good." So he did tell me that it was okay to feel that way, but when I'm up in front, remember, I'm not performing for the congregation. I'm not playing for my team. I'm playing for an audience of 1, and that stuck with me. Well, John and I eventually went back in, but I stayed outside, letting his words resonate in me. And when I finally came back in, it was John and Alex saying how great is our God, but not just in any way. It was like in a really upbeat way that it felt like we were actually celebrating how great our God is. And while John was playing the guitar, Alex was just tapping the pew with just like something really simple. And for some reason, I felt so alive just by that moment. And it hit me that I didn't need anything complex or technical. And I just moved by myself. My body moved and I hopped on the cone, and it was like something familiar came back to me. I stopped and thought for a second as I sat there. And then suddenly, it was like I knew what I had to do, except it wasn't my head leading my hands. It was my hands' response to wanting to praise God in that moment. I didn't think about time signatures or technique. It just flowed so naturally that I closed my eyes and raised my head. And it felt like I finally found what it means to have joy in worshiping God. I was on this spiritual high where I thought nothing could bring me down, but as people came in, I doubted myself again. And this time John was nowhere to be seen. So instead, I went downstairs, paced a little bit, mainly hiding from the crowd. Oh, and also Pastor Phil came to kiss Biox at that time, so that pressure to perform really doubled down in my head. So I was alone in the kitchen, trying to calm myself down, remember that feeling of finding joy in worshiping God, but I had this mental block that I couldn't get past. And that's when Haley came by, and out of nowhere, she's just doing leader things, she asked me, "You okay?" And my mind wanted to say, "Yeah, I'm good, I got it." But instead what came out was this. And I just couldn't say it, but it was just my body reacting. And that's when I opened up again and said I was struggling to find joy in worshiping the Lord, and honestly it felt liberating. Like I was actually letting someone else help me carry my burdens. And so Haley prayed for me to restore my mind and find that joy again in worshiping. It encouraged me to let God work through me. Then I went back, sat at my cajon, John counted me in. I tried to keep my mind on God, but anxiety kept creeping in, and it truly felt like a spiritual warfare in my mind. I wanted to worship my heart out to God through my hands, but my mind kept telling me tempo, beat, technique, and if I mess up, that's doing a disservice to God and my team. But then eventually, I could hear people's voices cry out, and Pastor Phil worshiping at the front, praising God out loud, and I got encouraged, and so I let go. I didn't care if my anxiety had a hold of me for a second and made me mess up. I pushed through with it, let God guide my hands, and just worshiped Him. I remember just playing the cajon, eyes closed, at peace with everything. And I was just swaying to the music, and in this moment, it's just you and me, God. And I just want to honor and praise you in the way that you trusted me. If people's hearts are moved, it's not me, it's you. I even raised my hands up when I wasn't playing, and again, as a shy guy, when I worship, hand goes in pocket. And so, with the worship over and Emily and Pastor Phil done their sharing, we transitioned to prayer, and there was this one villager that I felt like I got close to insanely fast, and I felt called to go over to him. I asked him if there's anything he needed me to pray for, and the things he shared felt similar to mine, and where we try to do things on our own, know where we should be, and we want to trust God, but we don't. And with my heart and spirit primed from being vulnerable to Haley and John, I prayed for him. And the things I was praying for him were actually also prayers for myself to come back to God and let him restore us. Even though we were living with guilt that hindered us from getting close to God and other people, we both knew that confessing our feelings out loud was the first step. And so, in my prayer, I confessed the feelings I've been suppressing for the past year that led to my plateau, and asked God to help us. I began to regain my joy in spirituality, and it's not just in worship, not just in Bible study or devotional time, but joy in the actual pursuit of God. And as I look back at my testimony, I saw that the common theme in me was that I still wanted control. I didn't trust God completely to dictate how my life would go. But after seeing what he can do, as long as I'm willing and trusting him, there's no limit to what can be done. And so I have 2 verses to share. Proverbs 19:21. Many are the plans in the mind of a man, but it's the purpose of the Lord that will stand. And Ecclesiastes 11 verse 4. Whoever watches the wind will not plant. Whoever looks at the clouds will not reap. Now, I'm not saying missions will solve all your problems. Your problems will still be there when you get back. But they just might reframe things in the proper perspective, and you'll never know how God will work through you until you try. And I finish with this. Even though you may doubt yourself and feel unprepared, whether it's perfectionism, anxiety, or living with guilt, remember there will always be a limit to our efforts. At some point, we have to surrender and say, God, you take care of the rest, because God has proven time and time again that he will always provide. It's never competence in ourselves, but confidence in God. So are you ready to let go and let God? Thank you for listening to my testimony.